Hello, and welcome to Law Deals, the podcast that dives deep into law firm transactions, succession planning, partnerships, and practice optimization. I'm your host, Ed Alexander. Today is a solo podcast episode where we'll be talking about why buyers buy law firms. This is a bit of a twist on other videos that discuss law firm value. And this episode actually grew out of a few recent law firm sale transactions where prospective buyers asked the age-old question, what am I buying? Many of them actually looked at the practices that we had for sale that they were interested in really as an inventory of matters that they could add to their own inventory. There was no view of, in their mind, there was no view of the operational qualities of the employees that were on the team, of any of the systems that were there, or the goodwill in the community. It was just merely the actual cases that were in play. It was interesting to me because some of it shook the owners. They began to question whether their practice had value or not. And I'm here to say that it did have value. And I felt like this episode was necessary to really talk a little bit about that kind of issue. So this question can really be broken down into two pieces. Why would I buy this practice? And what do I get if I buy this practice? Of course, the detailed answer to this really depends on the practice being offered, right? So the characteristics of the practice is well systematized, all of the things that we talk about that add value to a practice. But it's important to recognize that there are different buyers in the marketplace, and different practices or different aspects of a practice are going to appeal differently to different buyers. So the analogy I want to give is that of a soccer mom going into a car dealership looking for a vehicle. If the salesperson brings that soccer mom over to a sports car, a two-seater sports car, and starts showing her how fast it can go, and it's got the convertible, and this is going to be great for you when you're out, going out on the town, obviously she's not going to be interested in that because she's interested in being able to load up as many kids as possible into the vehicle and to move them safely to from point A to point B with all of their junk. And clearly a sports car isn't going to do that. And so when focusing on why a buyer might not be interested in a firm or might be viewing the firm as a different value than the owner views it, it's important to keep this analogy in mind. Now, there are two types of buyers that will generally buy practices: strategic buyers and financial buyers. So I'm going to delve into both of these, and I think this will help identify, number one, who you want to approach, but also, number two, what they're going to look at as valuable. Now, the thing to remember here is that financial buyers far outnumber strategic buyers. And I'll get into that reason, and I'll define them a little bit later in this episode. So first thing is to remember that a strategic buyer almost always has an existing practice or an existing related business, so something in a similar business area. And as a result, that buyer is going to get something extra from buying the firm. It's not just about the cash flow that purchased firm generates. It's all about how they can use some of the assets that come with that firm in their current existing firm or existing business. You'd find that a strategic buyer might be in the same practice area. They might have maybe even a complementary practice area. And this leads into the benefit, right? So think of a buyer who has a practice, but maybe it doesn't have a really great marketing infrastructure. So that buyer then goes out and buys a practice with proven marketing and maybe an intake staff and everything that is set up so that they don't have to implement it in their practice. So they're buying a system that they can put in their practice. Or perhaps, they need more staff, right? So if a practice has some really highly trained staff, maybe they're probate paralegals, and the buyer has a great going probate practice and needs to bring people on. That can work as well. That would be generally known as almost an acqui-hire type of transactions. So when we look at that, you're not going to know necessarily what the benefit is to the strategic buyer, but there is a benefit there. And oftentimes we can find out what that is through the conversations with the strategic buyer. But you want to be thinking about things like, would your client list be of benefit. So if, by way of example, the buyer is a family law firm and they're looking to acquire an estate planning law firm, well, what they're looking to do, obviously, is to be able to bring their family law clients over to the estate planning side once the family law matter is completed, and then vice versa, to continue to market to the clients and former clients of the estate planning practice that they're acquiring, so that as family law related matters come up, they can enhance that side. So you see how the practice itself can really enhance an existing practice for a strategic buyer. So the best strategic buyers are going to have an open and entrepreneurial mindset. They're going to understand the business of law. They're going to understand what the value is of the law practice of the seller to them. They've planned it out. They really understand the strategic piece. They usually know their numbers really well. And that understanding will allow them to see the possibilities of the practice that's for sale. Now, sometimes strategic buyers don't have that mindset, right? And if they don't have that mindset, then they might be looking at a practice as merely a way to add an inventory of cases to their current practice. Some other reasons a strategic buyer would pick up a practice, in addition to being able to making more money, is maybe they want to expand geographically. They want to move from their town into the next town down the highway, or begin to have a more regional presence. They might want to take out a competitor. So the combining of forces and then reducing the competition in the area. And then, of course, as I said, the lesser value-oriented strategic buyer would be looking at adding case inventory or something along those lines. So if we look at your practice in the sense of what's most valuable to a strategic buyer, really, if we think about it, it's going to be these client relationships, right? So have you maintained your client relationships such that a strategic buyer could come in and either continue that contact or enhance it by offering them additional unrelated services? And also your potential referral sources, right? Now, if you've got relationships out there, how can those relationships be leveraged by the buyer to come in? It's your personal reputation in many cases that has value, because the buyer then can leverage that by having you remain as of counsel with the firm post-sale. They can obviously use you to assist with the transfer of client and referral source relationships, but also can include your name in the firm name as of counsel as a retired partner. And then obviously, if you have productized services, if you've got recurring revenue because you've got clients on a maintenance plan, something like that, right? So systems, that kind of thing. So some things to think about that are not strategic buyer benefits is that, if they're just looking to open a location, so they want to take over your lease, that's not a strategic buyer. That there's no benefit to the buyer in that, because heck, they can go out and take over a lease at any location, right? And then, if there's nothing else, meaning you're a true solo practitioner, you haven't communicated with clients on a regular basis, right? You're kind of sitting in the position of doing the work and getting paid for the work you do, but not having that structure surround you with value. So what if none of those match your practice? Well, if none of those match your practice, then ultimately you're going to be talking with financial buyers. So really, what is a financial buyer? A financial buyer benefits from the cash flow that comes from your practice. And remember, that cash flow needs to be in excess of just somebody coming in and working in your practice. There has to really be some profitability for the investment in your practice. And so we're really focused on where do those benefits flow to you. And that's why we'll go and do a recast of your financial statements so that we can get to the real cash flow generating capability of your practice. We want to see that it is more than just having someone come in and sit in the seat. A financial buyer is typically going to step into the seller's shoes. So oftentimes we'll find that that buyer is going to be the attorney and literally the primary attorney of the practice. So they are looking at that from the standpoint of, is there adequate compensation? Is there a return on investment or their investment in the firm? And that's why it's important to have a staff on board and to have systems in the firm. So why do financial buyers buy practices? Well, honestly, it's because the law firm generates more income than they can make on their own. They can step into an operating practice without having to go through the startup hassle. The seller typically will have demonstrated that they can practice law, make a good profit, and still have a life. And the seller hopefully will have demonstrated that they're taking vacations, enjoying the fruits of their labor, that it is not a practice where they're a slave to the practice. So from a financial buyer perspective, are the most valuable components of the practice? Well, first, systemization, right? Very, very important that the practice operate without the owner being the person to direct every single activity in the practice. Next, it's in place and trained staff, typically experienced. So they've been there, they work the firm, and again, the owner doesn't have to be involved in every aspect of the firm. So it's a business, a proven marketing and intake system that doesn't require the owner to be involved in every aspect. Now, having said that, the owner will be involved in certain really important aspects like referral source relationship development, maybe being the face of the firm for various marketing activities. Those are all important. Those all should be the owner. But it's the day-to-day activities that have to go on that may not or should not necessarily require the owner to be the one making the decision to do it. It should be done automatically. Okay? The firm should have an electronic client list, former client list, referral source list, so that communication with clients, former clients, and referral sources is easy and can be automated. The best thing to do is to have a monthly or bi-monthly print newsletter. Second best would be to have an e-newsletter that goes out on a regular basis. Of course, productized services are also a nice add-on too. So what's not a benefit to the financial buyer? Really, it's the physical components of the practice, right? The tangible assets in there. What buyers look for are those intangibles, because if all you're offering are the tangible aspects of the practice, well, that's effectively a startup, right? And so the idea is you're getting paid for value that you've created. That value is generating the cash flow in excess of labor and without having to go out and really start the whole process over again. And of course, it's having a reasonable job, right? So not working 60 hours and obviously, getting paid an appropriate amount of money. That is the distinction between the two buyers, strategic buyer and financial buyer. If your practice is for sale and you're encountering kind of questions that are indicating the buyer doesn't see the value, you've got to determine what is it that the buyer really values and why is the buyer talking to us? What do they want to get out of the transaction? If that transaction or those values match what you're offering in your law firm, then great, then you can have a conversation. But if at the end of the day, they see a value in one aspect of the law firm and everything else is worthless to them, then maybe you're not talking to the right buyer. If you need any assistance in figuring out, hey, who's the right buyer for me to talk to, please give us a call. I'm happy to talk to you. And of course, if you want to find out about the process to selling your law firm, go to lawfirmexitsuccess.com. And we've got a bunch of free information there for you. You put your email address in it and you'll get it all. Thanks.